Chapter 30, Final Exam PT2. It had felt so right. That was the worst thing about it to Hermione. She and Neville had talked just that afternoon with Harry about the third-floor corridor and the Philosopher's Stone, and about how important it was to keep an eye on Jim and Ron and make sure they didn't do anything foolish. They'd even stayed up in the common room a few hours after curfew talking in case the two tried to sneak by. But instead, Jim and Ron just walked boldly up to them right before midnight to tell them that Dumbledore had been lured away, that Snape was going to steal the stone that night, that no one would listen to them, and that their only chance was to steal the stone themselves before Snape got to it. And suddenly, it felt right. Not that bit about Snape, of course. Hermione trusted Harry's judgment on that score, and she agreed with him that Quirrell was likely the culprit. Nevertheless, it suddenly felt right to think that whoever the thief was, no one else would be able to stop him except a quartet of first-year students who didn't know any major combat-related spells more powerful than the Leglocker curse that Quirrell himself had taught them. But none of that mattered, because trying to stop him was right, and everything else would take care of itself. Jim's invisibility cloak was a tight fit, but they all made it to the third floor without incident. The Cerberus was still waiting, albeit a little groggy-looking. She'd noticed a small harp lying on the ground nearby, but Jim was already on the case. Apparently, Hagrid has accidentally revealed to him that music could put the hound to sleep, which Jim did with a handmade flute the half-giant had given him for Christmas. The trapdoor was already open, but Neville stopped everyone from proceeding as he took a big sniff from the musty room below. Immediately, he informed the group that the room below was full of Devil's Snare, a dangerous carnivorous plant that killed by crushing its prey, but which was extremely vulnerable to fire. Neville went first and used the Bluebell Flame Charm to clear a path for everyone else. Jim's seeker skills made short work of the key room, but Hermione thought it was odd that someone would design a defense for the stone that could only be overcome by exemplary Quidditch skills. Something about it seemed not quite right, but she shook off her concerns as they made it through to the next room, which contained a giant wizard's chess board. That seemed even less right to Hermione, but she saw no options but to play. There was a moment of terror when Ron chose to sacrifice the knight he was riding in order to ensure a quick victory. She screamed as the other piece charged towards him, but at the last second, Neville cast the levitation charm on Ron, lifting him out of the way of the attacking piece and setting him down gently by the side of the board. "Well done, Neville," she'd said excitedly. "Yeah," he replied in excitement, "and I didn't even set him on fire."
"Wait, what?"
exclaimed Ron.
"Was that a thing that might have happened?"
Never mind.
Said Hermione quickly.
Forget he said anything. Jim, take the king so we can get out of here.
He did, and the quartet proceeded on through the next room and its already incapacitated troll to what Hermione thought was the penultimate room. Hermione easily solved Snape's logic puzzle, but even as she did, she had to push down the growing feeling of not right, indeed quite possibly wrong, that was beginning to worry her. What also worried her was that there was only one potion to go forward and one to go back, which meant that two people would apparently be stranded in this room until help arrived, which might be a while since they hadn't bothered to tell anyone where they were going, something that Hermione suddenly thought was quite out of character for her and very wrong indeed. But before she could go any farther to articulate that thought, Jim distracted her with an observation about the potion vials.
"Hang on a minute, these are auto-refilling vials. My dad carries a set of these. Aura's used them in the field to carry healing potions and the like. When you've completely emptied one, they refill a minute or two later with more of the potion that gets summoned from a central reservoir at DMLE headquarters." "That makes sense,"
said Neville.
"It wouldn't do for a thief to figure out how to get past those flames and leave no way for a pursuer to go after him. Besides, if Quirrell or Snape or whoever has already been this way, then he must have used the right potion, but none of them are empty, so who's going first?" "Maid,"
said Jim sommely.
This is my job, it always has been. Once I go through, I want each of you to take turns using the other potion to get out of here and bring help, if I can't figure out how to beat Snape."
He glanced at Hermione and Neville.
"Or maybe Quirrell, I guess. It's up to you to get the other teachers down here."
He downed the potion and went through the black flames. None of the others made any move towards the potion that would allow passage back through the purple flames. After a minute, the potion vial Jim had emptied refilled itself. Ron picked it up and said,
You two can do what you want, but Jim's my friend and he's not facing whoever is in there alone.
He took the potion, tossed the empty vial to Neville, and went through the black flames. Neville looked back at Hermione with an anguished expression. She put her head in her hands while trying to fathom how they'd gotten themselves into this position, but thinking about that too much made her head hurt. After a few seconds, she looked up at the sound of Neville guzzling down the potion to go forward. Then he put the empty vial back on the rack, picked up the vial to go back, and placed it in Hermione's hands. Go back, Hermione. You're the smart one. Get out of here and bring us some backup. I'll help Jim and Ron hold the fort as long as we can. Then he hugged the girl before turning and running through the black flames, leaving her alone. She stared at the flames for what seemed an eternity and then looked down at the potion in her hand, the one that would allow her to leave this place and summon help. She willed herself to open the stopper and do what she knew was the proper and sensible thing to do. She continued to focus on the potion in her hand for several minutes, even after the vial the others had used refilled itself. But for all her will and intellect, she found herself completely unable to do the smart thing. Instead, she was compelled to do the right thing, and so she swapped the potion in her hand for the one Neville had just used and gulped it down without a thought. Pulling her wand, she darted through the flames, bolstered by the feeling that she was doing the right thing. It wasn't until she saw Professor Quirrell looking up at her smugly with the 3 Gryffindor boys bound at his feet that the realization of her absolute wrongness struck her like a thunderbolt. Seconds later, Hermione too was bound alongside her housemates. Then, Quirrell summoned the parchment that allowed her to communicate with Harry.
How does this work, Miss Granger?
He said almost mildly. She said nothing and just glared at him angrily.
Miss Granger, if I have to ask you a second time, it will only be after I've introduced one of your friends to the Cruciatus curse. I'm sure your friend Mr. Longbottom has mentioned it. It's the curse that reduced his parents to semi-catatonic vegetables. Do you want me to ensure that Longbottom and his parents are reunited, permanently?
Don't tell him anything, Hermione,
said Neville firmly.
Ah, Gryffindor courage. How predictably noble.
Quirrell said with a smirk. Then he pulled his wand out and pointed it at Neville's head.
Stop.
Exclaimed Hermione.
I'll tell.
And then she explained how the parchments operated.
Thank you, Miss Granger. Oh, don't look so disappointed in your friend, Mr. Longbottom. I'm sure she believes that if I send a message to Potter Major, he, being a sensible young Slytherin, will go straight to a teacher. What Miss Granger fails to appreciate is the flaw in Potter Major's otherwise aggressively Slytherin nature. When his friends are in danger, he quite loses all sense of proportion. Isn't that right, Potter Minor?
Jim gritted his teeth at the Potter Minor designation that reminded him of his second-born status. But after the events of Boxing Day, he knew Quirrell was right. If Harry thought one of his friends was in trouble, he could be as reckless as any Gryffindor. Quirrell idly conjured a chair, sat down, and began sending messages, presumably to Harry. Then, after a few minutes, he pocketed the parchment and pulled out a pocket watch. 20 minutes. Then we'll see just how much Gryffindor spirit Harry Potter has in him. With a casual wave, he added gags to the bonds on the 4 students, and then he closed his eyes, almost as if napping. The children struggled, but were not able to break the magical bonds that held them. After a lengthy interval, Quirrell opened his eyes and checked his pocket watch again.
It seems Mr. Potter is more Slytherin than I thought,
he said, banishing the chair as he moved towards the bound children. Or perhaps simply not as clever. So how should I motivate him, I wonder? As I understand it, Potter Major cares little for his brother and less for Mr. Weasley. That leaves you, Miss Granger, and you, Mr. Longbottom. With a flick of his wand, he removed the gags from the 4 children. Now, who wants to scream first? Before any of the Gryffindors could respond, a commanding voice cried out from the staircase that led down into the room. QRL, I'm here. You can stop acting like a villain from some Muggle comic book.